Hello and welcome to the Metal Pack Pod, the industry's leading podcast for the global metal packaging industry. The Metal Pack Pod is brought to you by the Metal Packager, the number one digital resource for the global metal packaging market. With over 7,000 monthly users in over 150 countries globally, be sure to check us out on metalpackager.com. I'm your host Alex Fordham, and today we have a very special guest as outgoing Stolle Machinery CEO Gus Reall discusses his stellar career in the can making business. We discuss the industry changes he's seen and the future outlook for the health of the metal packaging business. We reflect on how the sector has evolved in the industry due to technological advances and the need for fresh perspectives. Gus also praises his successor, Michael Larsen, and highlights the industry's evolution, particularly the shift from a clear value chain to a more integrated global market. He identifies the post-pandemic era as the most challenging time, citing supply chain issues, inflation and geopolitical problems. He remains optimistic about the industry's future, especially in emerging markets like India and the Middle East. He also emphasises the importance of AI and collaboration within the industry, while noting the need for better promotion of metal packaging's benefits. He concludes with a personal reflection on his career and advice for the next generation, an episode not to be missed for sure. But before we begin the episode, we must give special mention to our sponsors, PPG Packaging Coatings. Their range of innovative and sustainable solutions help protect and beautify the world. Please do like our podcast to ensure you receive updates as each episode lands. The more traction we get, the higher the calibre of guests we can attract. We hope you enjoy the episode. Good morning, Gus. How are you?
It's good to see you and speak with you.
Likewise, I've been trying to nail you down for an interview for many years now, so I appreciate your time and looking forward to an interesting conversation about obviously the state of play within the can making business, but also perhaps we'll take a look at the past and challenges within Stolle's organisation, but also learning a little bit more about yourself as well. So I've got plenty to unpack here. So looking forward to it.
I'm also very appreciative of your advocacy for the metal packaging industry and the work that you do. And thanks for the opportunity to chat today.
No, I appreciate that. So, and that first question I have, I mean, we're seeing certainly a state of flux within the can making sector with a number of individuals with 20, 30, 40 years of experience looking to retire now. There's kind of a twofold question to start us off. I mean, why do you think that is? And also from a personal point of view, I'd be interested to see why you think now's the time to step back. And I know you're going to be obviously a board member, but looking to retire. So there's kind of a twofold question there to kick us off.
I believe that in roles that have certain responsibilities, you have a shelf life. I truly believe that. And while you want to think you're relevant and think you can bridge generation after generation, the fact is that things change, markets evolve. And I think there is a natural churn that should take place and bring some fresh blood to the game. Couple that with the technology advances that are going on, things like AI, which maybe we'll touch on later. I think there's a tendency to look to turn over a little bit. So whether it's speaking for myself or speaking for others, I just think that's the main driving factor behind it. And for me, I had always said that I never wanted to stay around past my time. And I just felt the time was right.
One question I'm always curious, particularly with those that have lots of knowledge with a particular industry, and certainly when they're obviously retiring, is the case of, do you prefer the industry kind of when you were first starting, sort of the excitement of kind of cutting your teeth, or do you prefer it when you're a little bit more experienced? So I'm just curious, what bracket do you fall into?
I have a strong preference for either the early days, the middle, or the end. But if you pressed me, I'd probably say the latter, believe it or not. The global expansion in the later part of my career, new people coming to the industry and flourishing, it's just been fantastic. And this belief that what we do can carry on for another 100 years is a driving factor, I know, for myself and for Toyo, that the business can go on. I understand the attachment to the past. I understand the comfort zone it represents. But I think sometimes when people reflect back, they will find that the past wasn't always perfect, and it had its challenges. And I think, lastly, what I'd throw out is something that my wife of many years said many years ago, and I give her credit for it because I've heard no one else say it. There is a reason that the windshield on the car is much bigger relative in size to the rearview mirror. And I think the excitement is out ahead. So if you really press me for an answer, I would say I probably enjoyed the later part of the game.
No, it's a very, very good analogy there. I've not actually heard that one myself, so I'll definitely use that moving forward. So just before we obviously look ahead to the state of play within the industry at the moment, I think it's probably a nice opportunity to pay tribute to your successor, Michael Larsen. I mean, what will Michael bring to the table? It's certainly an exciting opportunity for him, and I'm also curious because when just to use a soccer analogy, indulge me for a moment, apologies, but Sir Alex Ferguson of Manchester United, very successful manager for 25, 30 years, and subsequently Manchester United have really struggled. That can often happen in organisations, so I'm just curious how you're going to kind of are you going to take a step back and kind of let Michael learn the ropes, or are you going to be kind of on hand to kind of steer him in the direction and give him advice when needed?
Michael is a seasoned and capable professional. He has led Stolle's operations for nearly the last 2 decades. He's overseen a lot of the growth. So his hands are firmly on the wheel. There is no doubt about that. I will certainly act as an advisor when I can help. And by virtue of my time in grade, I guess I'll be a bit of a historian from time to time, giving those perspectives that sometimes are helpful. But Michael and his team will chart the course going forward, and it's in very good hands.
No, that's great to hear. And then just before we move on, I'm kind of curious about how the industry's evolved during the last few years, really. I mean, certainly I've been in the industry for 10 to 15 years now, and the industry has become a lot more, certainly more professional in its approach. So that would probably be my overriding take on how things have evolved. But for you, I know we talk about AI, that's certainly going to be a game changer. But in your industry tenure, what's been the most significant change, do you think, within the can making business?
For me, and this steps back into the early 80s and three-piece and then moving forward, it is the complexity and the global nature of the industry. Those have been the big changes. And with that comes cultural changes in the industry. Probably the easiest way to look at it is through the value chain. When I first started, the value chain was pretty clear. The brand owners sat at the top, the can makers came next, and suppliers of machinery and process equipment came down below, the classic tiers in any industry. And the aluminum fellows, the giants that really control most of the cost, they were off to the side. I used to refer to them as a tier 1 half. They weren't a tier 1. They were pretty close to the brand owners. Well, over the course of my career, brand owners have become can makers. Machinery makers have developed into systems providers, where they build can plants and provide entire full scope. It's moved into markets that we never envisioned 30 years ago. So that's been the significant change in my lifetime as the industry has become truly global, had different cultural impacts into it. And it's been a whole lot of fun. The trajectory is great. I think it's great. We have our steps forward and step backward as any industry does. But overall, I've seen not only a change in the industry, but I think good growth and sustainability in the industry.
Absolutely. And we'll get on to the growth projections. You did a couple of presentations at the Can Maker Summit and IMDPA, which I'm kind of curious to unpack because since then there's been a lot of changes. Certainly there's been a downturn within the industry sector that we can get ahead to, which you're probably expecting me to ask a couple of those questions, but we'll get onto those shortly. But just before we do so, quite keen to work out in terms of kind of the biggest challenges that you've seen within the industry since your time. I mean, obviously COVID was a challenge and also an opportunity for the industry, but we also, before my time, was the global financial crisis in around 2008. Just kind of keen to see what the most kind of interesting moments during your tenure were and how you adapted during those times.
Slam dunk, to use a U.S. sports metaphor, the pandemic era. Not so much during the pandemic proper, but what has followed. This has been the most challenging time I have ever seen, and I think I can give a reasonable explanation why. Throughout the history of metal packaging, for sure, we've been generally recession resistant. Not recession proof, but recession resistant. We had our moments. We generally lagged the downturns. We did better longer than most, and we led the recoveries. We came out of it sooner. And why was that the case? Well, when times were good, people drink a lot of beer. When times are bad, they drink even more beer. So generally, we were able to sustain ourselves through the ups and downs, even the global liquidity crisis. We had good years in 2008, 2009. Stolle Machinery did quite well. Lower volumes, but overall decent years. Enter the post-pandemic, and I think it has to be not just the virus itself and what it led to in terms of society and supply chain. I think it was also inflation, energy costs, geopolitical problems, war. All these things conspired to lead to this odd situation of a huge surge in demand, followed by an equal collapse in demand. I've never seen anything like it in my 5 decades around the industry. Head and shoulders event is what analysts call it, where things went shot way up, hit a little bit of a shoulder, then up to the top of the head, and then back down to the other shoulder, and then all the way down again. And it was unbelievable. And it's quantified in terms of cancellations. In all my years, I could only come up with maybe $30 million of actual product cancellation. I'm talking over a 40-year period, maybe $30 million. In a 20-month period, Alex, we saw $260 million of orders canceled.
Wow.
Unprecedented.
We interrupt this episode for a brief segment from our sponsors, PPG.
Packaging coatings from PPG draw on our company's 140-year history of innovation. We never stop improving our solutions to meet the evolving needs of can makers and the marketplace. That spirit of innovation results in technology like the cradle-to-cradle platinum-rated PPG Innovel Pro. PPG Innovel Pro is the latest enhancement to the world's #1 non-BPA beverage can coating. It still doesn't use any bisphenol ingredients, but experienced can makers report that it now sprays like an epoxy. Follow PPG Packaging Coatings on LinkedIn or visit packagingcoatings.com to learn more about why PPG is the coatings partner for can making excellence.
Gus, I just wanted to unpack a couple of the things you said there. I think you're right. The last few years, I think volatile is the best way to describe things. I mean, how have you guys adapted, and have things calmed down now, or is it still, are we still in a situation, a white swan event post-COVID, where that increase in demand and then that drop in demand, and with inflationary pressures globally as well, it's been a kind of a perfect storm for the industry, really. So have things settled, or is it kind of still, we're kind of still in that situation of turbulence at the moment?
The turbulence is behind us. We coped with it by simply muddling through, redeploying assets where we could, hanging on to, in the Stolle case, our business model as best as we could, dealing with the excess inventories that arose because of the overreaction, I guess, to the supply chain problems, although it wasn't an overreaction at the time because we had the orders in hand. So we have simply muddled through, but I think the short answer is turbulence is behind. There's evidence of growth returning, and when we get to unpacking more of the market, I'll elaborate further on that.
Absolutely. Just one final question on your career within the industry. As you do before these interviews, I did a bit of preparation and spoke to a few of your industry colleagues. I'm not going to mention who, but I had a couple of interesting questions. One of those was that you took obviously a senior role very early on in your mid-30s, and I was just kind of curious that did you feel like you had imposter syndrome, like a lot of people do, that you felt it was perhaps a bit much too soon, or did you kind of feel like it was a role, apologies for the cliche, but a role that you were born to do? I'm quite interested about how how that period was for you and how you adapted?
I'm not sure about born to do it, and I had a lot of great people around me throughout my career that helped me develop the background. But no, I never felt the imposter syndrome. And I think that's due to the fact that I started my career in my early 20s as a design engineer. And in those days, and probably still today in many industries, you followed your work out into the field and performed some service and had to live and enjoy your own cooking, so to speak, every day. So that gave me a very hands-on background. In my late 20s, I became a plant manager for Stand Hand Forming, part of Sequa Corporation. And so I had a good experience there. And at 36, I was the vice president of manufacturing for all of Sequa can machinery. So when afforded the opportunity 2 years later to take over the top role, I had a pretty broad background and a pretty hands-on background. So I think I was ready, young but ready. And lastly, I had a great team around me. The old Sequa can machinery team with many seasoned pros, and they had my back from day one and helped me path through that. So no, I never felt like I didn't belong. Certainly on occasion, I think, wow, this is a lot, but it all worked out.
And do you think that's because you cut your teeth within the industry? If you were perhaps from outside of the industry as someone in your mid-30s trying to act as president and CEO, would the challenges be there? You kind of had the respect of your peers because you've been in the industry for that length of time, and we know it's such a unique business that you can't blag your way through, and you need to have that knowledge bank with you. So do you think that was key in ensuring that you were ready for the job in hand?
Absolutely, Alex. And the people I met over the years in the field, the veteran people, I guess I was smart enough to listen and to learn. I've often been asked to write a book. I said, well, probably just industry people would buy it, but they said, so many people, and I do have quite a few stories from the day, and most are publishable. But just I learned from some great people, and that's what gave me the credibility, so to speak, to step into that role. I don't think I would have been as successful or successful at all had I shown up from a different industry without the background I had. So I think you're spot on there.
And then just on that note, I'm just quite curious about that. I know the industry's in recent years has tried to get knowledge from outside of the industry. Do you think that's important moving forward? Because we, a lot of the time we go to trade shows, everyone tends to speak about the industry that they've been part of for a long time. So do you think it's a case of trying to have a varied, diverse workforce? Do you think that's more important now, as certainly as we're seeing the industries develop and increasing globalization in society? Do you think the industry needs to basically improve its credentials in terms of getting experts from outside of the industry?
Certainly, as the roles change in the value chain, and as I alluded to earlier, companies take on different tasks, more engaged in process, maybe integrating things, you get into zones where when the knowledge resident in the industry traditionally no longer aligns with what you're trying to do, there's absolutely a need to diversify and get some outside views. And going back in my very early days, we always did that. I remember back in Standen in the 80s, we actually referenced the National Tractor Trailer Standards for doing some processes and procedures in the shop. And someone would say, what are tractor trailers or lorries, that you would call them, have to do with building body makers and covers? So yes, it's always a good idea to look out and gain perspective and not be in a shell. And it's probably more important today. But you also need to leverage the core knowledge within your own business and the expertise that got you from point A to point B.
No, thanks very much for that point. I just want to move ahead slightly. Yeah, we alluded to it earlier, but I just want to kind of deep dive into it in a bit more detail. But you don't do presentations too often, but you did. You appeared at the CanMaker Summit in 2022, and then IMDPA in 2023, and you were fairly bullish about the future health of the industry. Had some good statistics that I have here. We weren't to know that the industry would obviously go through a downturn that we're from my industry sources say that we're kind of coming towards the end of that period. So I'm just curious now, off the bat, are you still bullish for the future health of the industry?
Shift to the right, driven by what we talked about earlier, the post-pandemic economy, both globally and within the metal packaging industry. The shift to the right that resulted of demand and growth caught me off guard. No question about that. From a timing perspective, I'll concede to being surprised. But from a modeling perspective, the modeling we've done over the years is intact. I can tell you the Stolle backlog right now would support what I'm saying, that there's still bullishness. There should be bullishness. The bookings in emerging markets is actually quite significant over the last 5 to 6 months. Truly even surprising me. We predicted growth in certain areas, but it's coming quickly. And when the more normal growth returns to the established markets, the North Americas, the Western Europes, the Brazils, I see a lot of good times ahead. So yes, bullish. I'm not backing away from anything in Lisbon or anything in Chicago, other than conceding that the shift to the right definitely took place.
I can imagine that's a question that you've had to answer quite a bit in the last 12 to 18 months. So it's good to hear that definitely still bullish. I've made a couple of notes there in terms of you mentioned emerging markets there. Is there any emerging market in particular that is exciting the guys at Stolle at the moment?
In terms of Stolle, we're seeing significant growth and opportunity in both the Middle East and India at the moment.
That's interesting. So because we've also, over years, India in particular has always been that territory ready to explode, and developing middle class means increasing consumption of canned goods, and it's never really materialized. That's interesting. That seems to be the case. Is it the functioning middle classes that are increasing more consumption of canned goods that's the driver, or is there other external factors at play?
I'm there. I spent the bulk of my career, particularly when speaking about the market, when India was raised as a question, I said, no, not in my career. Not in my career will those dynamics kick in the way they did in China, where GDP per capita and population would drive these things. And I don't want to dive into a whole discussion about India and why I felt that way, but I felt that way. About a year and a half ago, I said internally, and I think I may have said it publicly once, I said, I think the time is approaching. I think those dynamics, those linkages, middle class that you allude to are finally hitting a tipping point, and we're going to see that growth. I'm sorry, I won't be around to enjoy it. So yes, it's interesting to me too, and I feel somewhat not vindicated, but I feel like I was accurate there, because it didn't happen for 20 years, and we all looked at the population and we were frustrated. It's happening now. Middle East is surprising to me in terms of the volume right now, and I don't want to speak about specific areas because that would go a little bit too far as market intelligence that we had. But I would just say broadly, the Middle East is quite a significant chunk of business right now.
That's good to hear. And I told you we'd go off on a few tangents because, to be honest, we could probably have a whole podcast on the emergence of the Middle East and India alone. So we'll probably leave it there for today. But just one other point I wanted to make on the your answer just then. You mentioned the Stolle model. So you obviously have had done a lot of modeling in the past few years. Just quite curious to just learn a little bit more about that, because it's been referenced in the industry for a while. Do you have a team of analysts that you refer to, or do you use external resources? Obviously, you're not going to give too many secrets to the castle, but I'm just quite curious about how that works. And just you mentioned that the prediction of 109 can lines to be installed by 2026. Is that broadly still accurate, or have you had to readjust the model as a result?
And let me go back and give credit where credit is due. I keynoted the then IMDA before they added the other letters back in 2010, 2011, that time frame. And I did present the model, the Stolle version of the model, publicly for the first time there. There'd been smaller times we'd done it, smaller events, so symposiums and such that we hosted. That was the first time I took the model public. And I gave credit to Charlie Price of Belvac back then, because Charlie was the keeper of the list of canned lines around the globe for many, many years in the industry. And he would share that with industry colleagues so we could all look at just how many canned lines are out there. How many, the analytics part of it wasn't quite as developed then, but I want to be very, very pointed and clear that the idea to go down that road, I tip my hat to Charlie, who's no longer with us, but who's a great friend and a great industry person. So that was the Charlie Price model. We took it, particularly during our private equity days, did use some outside resource, mostly analytical type folks, to build stronger, robust regression models around population and GDP per capita growth. So it was a combination of external resources and then our own internal data, but mostly carried by the Stolle team as it is today. So that's the basis for the model. It's not all that special or secret, and I put the graphs up that anybody could reverse engineer it when I speak. And it's done pretty well. It's been robust. Back to the 109, that's tweaked a little. Again, shifted to the right. It's probably more in the 90-ish area right now, and probably added a year. So someone could say, "Well, you were off," and the answer would be, "Yeah, a little off, and a little shift to the right." But that's being primarily driven by China, which maybe we will talk about separately. But that's driving the diminution in the model to a large degree. But the model still broadly looks pretty good. And the last comment I'll throw in, yes, you're right. You mentioned earlier, you must have been asked the question a lot in the last couple of years with the volatility. You're absolutely correct. But at the London summit recently, the Global Aluminum Can Sustainability Summit that I was pleased to attend, I waited, held my breath, and even some people looked at me in there when the investment bank analysts stood up and gave their view on the market over the next 4 to 5 years. And the number they put out very publicly was very closely aligned to the numbers that I've spoken about, that Ball Corporation has spoken about. So it was a sigh of relief. And I said, well, they're the investment people are showing some optimism. And they're not usually the most optimistic folks.
Absolutely.
In the world. So I'm feeling okay. I still got some bullishness left in me.
That's good to hear. And in business, isn't it true that confidence breeds confidence? So if there's an increasing amount of confidence in the market that we're through a sticky period and moving forward, there's optimism that hopefully should translate into some positive business moving forward. But I just wanted to, you mentioned China. I think that's probably a nice opportunity now to address potentially the elephant in the room, so to speak. The continued growth of China is obviously going to be significant, not least with the recent presidential inauguration that took place earlier this week. So we're going to see some potential changes in terms of tariffs and certainly government policy. So I'm just curious about specifically for the can making business, what will the impact be? Don't want to ask you to play clairvoyant, but just your take on things and how potentially this is going to reshape the canning business, particularly in the US, but I think we're going to see some changes in Europe as well. But specifically in the US, quite interested to hear your take on things.
To dive into that, before I do, I just want to thank you for saying confidence breeds confidence. What you said a minute ago, that is so important, and it's so easy to get down when events happen, things collide, perfect storms occur, and forget about the passion for your product and for the market and for the belief behind it. So thank you for saying that. I think that's an important message that everybody in every industry should keep in mind. So thanks.
No worries. I mean, it's often a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? If you believe something to to be true, then that is certainly the case. But in terms of China, I'd be interested to hear your views because I think we're in for an interesting period, not least in governmental politics in the US, but specifically to the can making business. How is this shaping the marketplace?
I'm participant and player in China. I have a very, very long history in the Chinese can market. I have many good friends. I participated in many industry events over there where I was the only non-Chinese in the event. So I do believe, sounds a bit arrogant, but I do believe I have a real good view of China. I am disappointed and to a degree confused about what I'm looking at right now in China. It was not very long ago, pre-pandemic, that we had projects, not necessarily on the books, but as I said, I have a lot of close contacts there. And China was poised to nominally double the market size and seek to equal the United States in size, can market. And this is not atypical for the Chinese market. They do have a build it and they will come view of things, as they've done in many arenas. And we were all very excited. The pandemic, and that was in our growth model. So when I talk about the diminution in the growth model, a large number of those lines I'm not talking about do come from China and fall out of the model because Stolle is very, very strong in China. So coming out of the pandemic and considering some of the politics, I look at the robustness of the automotive market, EVs off the charts, aviation, things that are going on. And I think, all right, the people that are building these things are probably having a beer or two, and the packaging market should follow along. And it isn't. It is ground to a halt. Yes, there are some announcements, some plants being built, some lines, but overall within China now I'm talking, and I'll get to your question about the global situation, it's ground to a halt. And I'm just confused. I am confused that why we're not seeing more growth within China. So that has yet to play out. As far as China can makers reshaping the global market, and in particular the U.S., while I've seen expansion into Southeast Asia and, of course, expansion into Europe by Chinese can makers and rumblings about expansions potentially into North America and other places, I'm not seeing the manifestation of that in terms of orders. So I'm not sure that the Chinese can-making industry is going to reshape certainly the U.S. or even the global market in the short term. Now, perhaps there are things developing that will drive that more quickly or in a different direction. But today, Alex, I'm not seeing it. I'm just seeing a market that was, as I said earlier, poised to double in size and look more like a U.S.-type market, doing nothing and kind of struggling. So that's where I see it.
Do you think it's potentially because of, obviously, governmental policy? Particularly, I know, speaking about I'm glad you mentioned the EV actually, because certainly the European motor vehicle market is really struggling right now. The Chinese are knocking it out of the ballpark in terms of EV vehicles, and almost every other car on the road at the moment, new car on the road certainly in the UK is a Chinese model, and obviously the batteries market, etc. And it seems to be very successful. So do you think it's a case of opportunities in other markets, and sometimes the EV market in particular is a sexy new industry and everyone likes to have something new and shiny? So do you think it's potentially a case of focusing on other industries and that's maybe affecting the domestic can market in China? Or do you think it's just too early to tell what the implications have been?
If the government is supporting the can market in any respect and some of those resources are being redeployed, I can see what you're saying to be a possible factor. But my entire history around the globe has been, as I alluded to earlier, when people are doing well, they're drinking beer or a soft drink or energy drink. So whether you're working in an EV factory or an aviation factory, the result is consumption and growth of the middle class and such. And I'm just not seeing any of that. Conversion from glass to metal was a big theme in China for a while, and that's not happening. So I think you could be right. with the extent that it's government funding that could be moved around, but I'm still not seeing the demand for product that I would think I'd see out of a 1.3 billion population. So it's frustrating, and it's a bit of a hole in my model for sure.
Well, I think that's a nice opportunity for perhaps our audience that will be listening to this podcast will probably take a snippet out of this conversation and put it out to our audience, that any feedback and any observations will be well received, because I think that's definitely an interesting discussion point for sure. So, I think that's a case of wait and see what's happening. So, no, appreciate your answer there. Very, very interesting. And I think obviously we can't have a conversation about state of play at the moment without mentioning AI. Certainly going to be a game changer for probably every business globally in any industry. And the pace of change that we're seeing, particularly in the last 18 months, has been unbelievable. Stolle have certainly been on the forefront of early discussions on AI. So congratulations to you guys, and the Lights Out plant, and obviously loads of discussions around that have been really interesting. So I just want your take on things about AI. Are you still very much in the pro camp, or do you still see there's potential drawbacks here, and what does it mean for the industry? And also, I want to just see about Stolle as well, about how you guys are looking to use AI moving forward. So, apologies, there was about 3 or 4 questions there, but no, it's a subject I'm quite interested in as well. So, I think there's certainly a lot to unpack, and we could have a podcast alone on that.
Well, very relevant. In a word, AI is everything. It means everything. There's no other way to put it, in my view. Over 10 years ago, I held up my cell phone during an exec team meeting, and I said, "Hey, folks, we need an app." And the team looked back at me and said, "Well, an app for what?" I said, "For everything, for the machines, for the process, for spare parts, for maintenance. We need an app." And I said, "We need an app because that's how people are living their lives now, in their cars, in their personal life, social media. They're living via apps. And in the future, not only will people continue to do that, the skill sets will demand that there be an app, because we won't be manufacturing or training any more decorator operators or body maker operators or tooling experts, because a lot of this will be reduced to process. And then AI will come in over the top of that and even start to look at some of the creative aspects of can making, of machinery making. I'm sure AI has something to do with a lot of the branding we're seeing on products and all that. I can't believe that major brand owners aren't dishing off to AI to say, "Hey, give me a new idea for a label, or give me an idea for a theme song."
Absolutely.
We've seen it in entertainment. So I think it's just everything, Alex. And any company has to be not only aware of it, but baking it into their thought process, using the tools. Now, giving everything up to it and saying, "Hey, we just turn it over to AI," I think that's a different conversation. And you're right, that's a whole different podcast. But we're going to continue to move forward with machines that are self-learning to a degree, where we can do prescriptive maintenance instead of predictive maintenance. The machine will be smart enough to know the process is going sideways and fix it before it gets out the door. We talked about lights out decoration. So Stolle, I think, will continue to invest in that. And I know the parent company, Toyo Group, also invests heavily in those technologies.
So you, overall, do you see it as a net positive, or do you just think it's like the advent of the internet, for instance, it's just unavoidable?
Time for a few pints on that one. And not only a podcast, but a conversation. Given my generation, although I'm fairly technologically fluent, I think it's probably a net positive. And I'll go to the pharmaceutical industry. There was an article just out the other day that suggested that some new drugs may be created in very, very short order to deal with some very difficult diseases, because AI can process it, do the chemistry, and present things that would take teams of researchers years, and maybe that could happen in days or months. So I guess, like all other technology, it'll have a net positive aspect to it, but it's certainly frightening. But I don't think anything's going to stop it, regardless of what my opinion was.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of obviously using the technology at our disposal, but I think the personal interaction and the quality of conversation and relationships will become more and more important. So that's just my take on things, but my humble opinion. But yeah, I think it's just an interesting time for sure, and I think it's definitely going to shake up things within the can making business. So perhaps yeah, a subject for another day for sure. But just want to pull back to our. We mentioned obviously the Can Maker Summit. You also mentioned that you were keen for increasing closer collaboration within the can making business. Are we seeing this, or are we still kind of stuck in our individual company bubble, making sure that our revenue targets are being hit for financial years, and we're worried about kind of feathering our own nest? Or do you think that industry players are coming together to benefit the industry as a whole?
I think definitely a trend towards coming together, sharing more, collaborating. There's definitely a trend. Is it an overwhelming trend that's just a sea change in how everyone goes to business every day? No. People are still have their stock values, their business objectives, their quarterly reports, their pressures. So there will always be some of that pull back to each individual bubble where they will work the equation. But I am seeing more cooperation than I saw in the past, and I hope that trend continues.
No, thanks very much for that answer. And just before we conclude things, we've mentioned a few external opportunities and threats, but is there any other issues for the industry that we need to be mindful of, particularly in the next 5 to 10 years? What are the senior guys at Stolle? What are front and center of your planning and issues that we need to be mindful of as an industry?
It's been maybe a frustration of mine, maybe not others, but of mine for many, many years, is the reluctance, and for lack of a better word, the reluctance of the industry to really aggressively promote metal as the best substrate. That's always been frustrating to me. I understand that the major brand owners, fillers and brewers, use a lot of plastic and a lot of glass, and therefore there's an uneasiness to come out and pound on the table about metal, and say things about glass and plastic that might not always be flattering. But I do think we need to be our own best advocate and let the market forces work it out. So if you want to talk about an internal threat, it would be not championing our own substrate enough. As far as external threats, of course, sustainability pressures, environmental pressures. Current can making is process intensive. It's got chemicals, it's got water, it's got a lot of things in it, consume a lot of resources. But there are opportunities out there, and for example, laminate can production that could greatly change the equation there. If we could get together and collaborate more to make those things work, as opposed to maybe being in various individual cans. So I think the overall health of the industry is great. I think the metal package has shown its robustness and its future. I think new beverages will continue to evolve around the globe, and while there will be disruptive packaging, I think metal itself can be disrupting. So overall, not only am I bullish on the numbers for cans, I'm bullish on the product. So there are always threats, but I think there are great opportunities. And that collaboration you're talking about, the more we up the game there and promote ourselves, confidence builds confidence, I think you said.
Absolutely. And I think what you said is absolutely true. And I think sometimes we do have to pat ourselves on the back occasionally, because speaking to a contact of mine in the PET industry, he actually said, and I quote, within the PET industry, that they are attempting to become more can-like in terms of obviously the end-to-end production. So they're obviously taking note that we're doing some good things there. So the message is getting through about the potential and certainly the sustainability credentials of metal packaging, which is terrific. But there's always going to be threats along the way. If there wasn't, that would be boring, right?
Absolutely.
Just to finalise things as well, you've obviously had a really interesting, varied career. You've travelled all over the world with business. Is there been any regrets along the way in terms of things that you wish that either the company or yourself hadn't have done, any opportunities missed, or are you kind of satisfied with your lot, so to speak?
No, it sounds like a very canned answer, but absolutely no regrets. I met my wife 36 years ago at Standen in the factory. I've had a great career. All the elements of that career, the ups, the downs, if they didn't exist, then maybe the journey wouldn't have existed. You just can't separate them out. So as canned an answer as it may sound, no, I don't have any regrets, and I wouldn't change a thing about the journey. Just glad I was able to take it.
That's terrific. I know you prefer to keep things on trend in terms of speaking about the industry, but if you can just indulge us this one last time in terms of just finding a little bit more about Gus the man. I've just got a series of quick fire questions, if that's okay, just to end on. So first off, and in terms of innovations within the Stolle group, what's the one you've been most proud of?
Volumetric speed increases in the early 90s. That was a truly fascinating time to watch gauge come down, speeds go up. It was just, it was great. It was great to see.
That's a fair one. And in terms of best advice you've received?
That's easy. One of my earliest bosses way back when talking about how you should view your importance in the industry. He said to me, do you see what happens when a rock gets tossed into the pond and it makes a hole in the water? You see how fast that hole fills up? That's how important you are.
That's very good. Absolutely. And in terms of industry mentor, would it be that same person, or is there anyone else?
Nowhere near the industry. But he was named in 1957 the president, then CEO of his company at age 37, and that was some accomplishment back then, and stayed in that role for 23 years and retired at 60. And I watched him, totally different industry, nothing to do with can making, and I watched him and the balance he showed over the years with the business and the people. And at the end of the day, I would have to say, with no disregard for the many, many mentors I've had in the can industry, ultimately for the roles I've had, it'd be my dad.
Yeah, sounds like an excellent one. And then your advice for the next industry generation?
Be passionate about the product, process, develop that passion. If you don't have it, have fun.
And this final one, how would you like to be personally known and remembered within the industry?
Folks in an industry with a great team. Just one of the folks. That's all.
I think that's a nice place to end there. So, Gus, it's been a real pleasure. Wish you well in retirement, and please be sure to keep in touch. And thank you for your endeavours within the industry these past number of years. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk, and thanks again for advocating metal packaging as you do.